start recording. Okay. Today is Hey Elul, September 4th, 2011, Tafshin Ayin Aleph, September 5th. Vavel, I think, actually. Okay, correction, Vavel. And Labor Day in Crown Heights. There's some festivities outside. Just giving you all a sense of the time and space that we're in. And now we're going to go to a place that's higher than time and space, right?
And bring higher than time and space into time and space.
Yeah. And being that we haven't done this in a little while, we had a little break. So I'm just going to refresh myself, refresh everybody here. We're up, we concluded Perek Reish Chav Ches, 228, Hamshech Ayin Beis, the first chapter in the Maimer Bamidbar, Erev Chag HaShavuos, Tofresh Ayin Dalet. So, to refresh ourselves, the Rebbe Rashab is in a process, and maybe it's already a long process that began many pages earlier. What did you say? Perek Kuf Pei Dalet, right? Kuf Pei Dalet, yeah. Where he began to explain, he was thinking about the mamutza of the two levels of Torah, Chechenis HaTorah and Primis HaTorah. Where Primis HaTorah is closer, so to speak, to Elokus, more revealed Elokus. Chechenis HaTorah is more on the terms of us humans on earth and existence. So, to explain it, Perek Kuf Pei Dalet, he began to be the Inyan, to explain it with Yeshaya, Perek Chav Hei, Havaya lekei ata remamcha oider shimcha kasisa pele eitzis marachik amuna uman. And the Rebbe Rashab cites the Zohar and Parsha Balak that explains this pasuk. And all these pages from page Shinayin Hey or page Kuf Pei Dalet all the way to Reish Chav Ches, which would be 16, 28 and 16. The 44 prakim are all elaborating on this in detail. And Bechlolos, it's about explaining the mamutza in the lashon of this pasuk, that Avay Lekei Ata Rememcha is that Avay Lekei Ata goes on the Eshes Svidus of Atzilus, and Rememcha is elevating them to the level of keser. Kasisa Pele is bringing down the Pele, which is the two ways that chochma is called alef and peleh. So peleh is how it connects to Primis Atik, which is, as he explains, is Primis of stim'aah, and that connects to the alef. Alef is to teach how chochma, how Atik comes down through Chechenis chochma stim'aah, and ultimately in chochma gluya, revealed chochma, to communicate, to transmit that level of peleh into alef. That is very, very brief. So what I would like to do is just go over this last Perek Reish Chav Ches. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'll just go, the highlights. So to do so, the Rebbe Rashab. Let me just quickly go through this. Okay. And just to show you the connection, there back in Perek Reish Kuf Pei Gimel at the end, he spoke about the 5 levels in Torah that are alluded to in the pasuk Vayhi Etzli Omer. So here too, in the beginning of the Maimer, the beginning of Vayhi Etzli Omer, now Bamidbar Ayin Dalet, now page Tov Samach Aleph, he also talks about these 5 levels. But clearly he's tying it all together. So I'm just going to read through. I'm reading now on page Tov Samach Beis. I'm reading, just summarizing, so we have at least a fresh summary here. Okay, so it goes like this. So what does it say in Parsha Balak? That Hashem Elokeata is Kalel all the Eshes Svidus, that's Silas. I'm reading right here. I'm not going to read just summing it up. How does that work? Havaya Lekei is Chochma Bina. Ata is Chesed and Malchus. Ata, it's Chesed and Malchus. And I remember you have to L'reimim Klolos Eshtalshus Ba'atzmes Ein Sof. So elevate, to be mereimim, to elevate, to lift up. to exalt these Esespheres into Atzmus Ein Sof, which in essence is the Mamutza. You're taking Netzalim, which are a shape and form and definition of chochma through Malchus, and you're elevating it into the level that's Atzmus Ein Sof, that's higher than Netzalim. So right there you have the Pasuk immediately is telling you the process. So the purpose of existence is that the Eibishter created the structure of existence. Remember, the whole question was, how do we connect? Where's the Mamutza? Keser alone can't just be explained as Mamutza because Atik is always removed. Arich is always the root of the Netzalim, of the emanations. So the answer would be chochma stim'aah. So this pasuk is saying that the idea is elevating the Esespheres. And then he brought the summing up that this Yeshaya said in the Nevuah was like a type of hakdama to the pasuk afterwards, where he talks about the bittul of klippa. In other words, from mevatel, the klippa below, you have to reach deeper up. So it really explains the purpose of existence even in a deeper way. It's not just about connecting us to Elikus. If you want to destroy, you want to be mevatel, annihilate the klippa, the malchus, the noiga, you have to reach deeper into the root. So that's the next pasuk of Yeshaya. That's why he begins, because I want to be able to mevatel the klippa, I have to reach I have to elevate the spheres to a higher place, and then it comes down further. In order for the bittul, that's only through bringing down a new energy, chodesh from atzmus. And in order to bring down that chodesh, you first have to have an elevate, first halah. Before there's hamshacha, you have to have halah. And that's Aramemcha, that's lifting up your stalshlus into Atzmus and safe, which in turn brings down this new Chodesh. And that's the next piece of the verse. Oida Shimcha, I acknowledge your name. What's Oida Shimcha? The Oida is Hamshacha. So Aramemcha is Aliyah. You're elevating Havaya Lekei Ata, Chochma through Malchus into Keser, to get the Chodesh. And then Oida Shmecha, I acknowledge your name, which means I draw it back down into Malchus, Shimcha's Malchus, and through this becomes the bittul of Neiga. That's like the summary of the beginning of the pasuk. But then we still need to know how this is done. This is just stating what's done. We go up, we come down. So then he continues in the pasuk, the next section of the pasuk, after he says, I elevate Havaya Lekeata, and we bring it down, Eidah Shmecha, I acknowledge your name, I draw down your name. He goes on, alef-peleh, the word key. In other words, it's like a cause. This is the reason, this is how we do it. Now what is that referred to, this part of the pasuk? Alef-peleh goes on chochma. And the Zohar there, Balak, that we're citing, explains, Pele is the keser levusha, the cover and the concealment, and the levush and the garment that dresses up this concealed light, the hidden light of Atik. The whole lengthy discussion how Atik becomes Chochma, how Tainug and Chochma interact. So this is, and then he says, Hainu, this is Kamisha Chochma el legaba keser. This means, this is alef-peleh, according to the Zohar, is how Chochma el legaba keser elevates, so to speak, into keser. And conceals the light of keser. And here he brings back what he was discussed at length. This is all the summary. That someone has meichen the gadlus, someone who really has the presence of mind, has the maturity, talk about meichen the gadlus, a high level of intellect, has the ability to conceal pleasure, the pleasure he has from something, even his essential pleasure. Why? Because he says, because chochma is tainug be'etzem mahusa. Because chochma is tainug. The example he gave about building the home. The tainug is amorphous. You have the pleasure. It remains abstract. Chochma is how tainug manifests in the way of implementing its need to satisfy that pleasure, that desire. That desire. That's the word, desire. So we see from this is a proof. Since hak moichin conceal tainug, tainug is far higher than meichen. It's like saying, how can my hands hide ruchnis? They're not in the same level. But if they are the same level, then it can conceal, because it is the same thing. Okay. So it's be'etzem muhusa, it's tainug, but it manifests, it expresses itself in a different muhus called chochma. Ava be'emes muhusehu ke'ech hatainug. That itself needs plenty of explanation, and I think we'll learn it when we go over it again, what that means, because on one saying the muhus be'etzem is tainug, but it manifests in another muhus. Usually you'd say the muhus of it is tainug, but the mitzias is chochma. Like the inner is really tiny, but he actually uses the muhus again. In other words, it like has two personalities really. But the real personality, if you really cut to the core, is pleasure, desire. Because it keeps saying, except it comes, it manifests, it expresses itself in a different muhus. It's almost like a chameleon in a way. It's really something else that appears to be. It doesn't say that also. It's not appears. It does come in a different muhus. Okay, fine. Something to review and something that needs good explanation. But that's definitely what he's stating, and we need to fully understand. It's okay. Because this is critical. Because being that the Tainuk becomes Chachma, that's where Atik meets Atzilus, essentially. That's why it's such a vital piece, because it means there's one part of the interface that actually is both this and that. I'm sure in technology there's examples of it. Whenever I think of a computer, so original computer programming was always like zeros and ones. Real machine language, as they call it. Then they took zeros and ones and turned it into programming language that both programmers know. It's already it's an interface. Those programmers in turn created the software like, let's say, DOS or other operating systems. It's interesting they call it DOS.
Yes, that's what this operating system.
Right. And then later other operating systems, to the point that you can sit by a computer, you press an A, and it's just triggering a whole series of sequential commands. That's going all the way into the essential interface that gets what you want. So we don't know anything, you press the A. So you see in the interface itself, there are probably several levels. And the question at some point is where, how do you get the electrical impulse, which has no language, end up having an A on your screen? That's it's really a similar type of question. I mean, obviously this is infinite and finite, alakus and Welt and the world, but nevertheless, it's the same idea. A computer it doesn't have physical letters in it. So it'd be interesting to know if those interfaces are all equally spaced, so to speak. Or is there part of it that actually plays a role that does is both the machine language and our language, if you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I'm very familiar with it, but I'm not sure what you're looking at.
No, I'm looking, you see, when interface, two things are meeting. So there are levels where they're still apart and they just slowly, language is created to, but there's a point where maybe there's one piece that actually functions like a dual function that both represents the transmitter and the receiver. That's all I'm really.
It's got to be.
Maybe every level does it. You see here he's using chochma as like that level. That's like this agent. That's really bepnimius behusei is tainuk, but it manifests as chochma.
It's probably more extended.
So, like for example, the previous chochma stim'aah is much closer to that type of interface than the change chochma stim'aah. I'm just asking if every level of an interface is equidistant.
If I would make a guess, I would say it's just the opposite in the computer world. It's superficial and external, but the machine language is changed into A, which you see probably happens at the level of your screen or your, when you say your impulse, it happens, in the beginning. And what we're saying here is just the opposite. It happens much internally.
Okay, fine. Anyway, let's go continue here. And that's why Koyach HaChochma has the power to conceal on Tainuk. Going back to the pasuk, Yasisa Pella, like the Zohar says, Pella, Chochma is able to conceal. Okay. And this is the level of Chochma stim'aah. And here the Rebbe Rashab uses the word Lapamim Ho'ela. Sometimes Chochma stim'aah, they conceal Chochma, the unconscious Chochma. At times it goes up. Lapamim Yeredis, and at times it comes down. That means that at times it conceals, and It descends to become the source of revelation. So chochma has that ability to be both a concealer and a revealer. See, here I'm tempted to connect it to something that I always like relate to. I don't know if he means it exactly that. Like, a good teacher is really a concealer and a revealer. As he conceals, he reveals. Because if you allowed the whole intensity of the idea to be expressed, it would be confusing. On the other hand, if you don't allow anything through, then it's not teaching anything. So it's really through concealing he reveals. Like the mashal conceals. The intention is not to conceal, the intention is to reveal, but it's a concealing that is a process of revealing. I don't know if he's saying that exactly, because that's the ultimate educational process. But it's very similar to that. That's something that he doesn't actually doesn't go all the way. He says sometimes it goes up, sometimes it comes down to become the source of revelation. So he doesn't say while it conceals, it reveals. That would make it even more geschmack, because then it's a real mamutza. Because it's not just an interface that's partially keser and partially atzilus. It actually would have, as it conceals keser, it reveals atzilus. But who knows? Maybe later he will say something deeper. So this is one step before that. Okay. And this is how chochma is called pella, because keser is pella. So when chochma conceals the keser, it's also called pella. In simple English, pella means awe, wonder. So that's that part of chochma. Then he continues. I'm doing the review. Then there's a second taich in Zohar. Kiosisa pella, kiosisa alef. Pella is the letters of aleph. Now what's aleph? So he brings aleph bina. Aleph bina means it teaches bina. So it's a different meaning. Pella is how chochma goes into keser. Here he's speaking how chochma comes into bina. The shape of the aleph is made up of 3 legs, 3 pieces, 3 parts. This is all the Zohar, the second pirush in the Zohar. The first, the aleph is made up of a dot above, a dot below, and the line in between. The first one is the higher secret, the Adam Kamah. And they all come together in the aleph. And that's why aleph corresponds to the number 1. This is Sisapala. And now the Rebbe Rashab, the fact that the Zohar says that it's a dover acher, it's a second explanation, you have to say, because now he's explaining a Sisapala in a different way from what he explained earlier. The first explanation, chochma is pella, because it's kisui, it's a cover and a garment that dresses up the hidden light of Atik, because it conceals keser. As we explained, that this is all the level of chochma stim'aah that conceals the light of keser. But this is not how chochma is on its own. This is how chochma is, so to speak, outside of its own domain, where it's doing the role of concealing the tainug or the keser in the process of transmission. The other chochma on its own is gili. Like we say, alef-peleh chochma, ulfen of limited teaches. Chochma by nature is a wisdom. It's not a level of concealment. It's a level of revelation. It may be a spark, but it's still some revelation. It's teaching. He says, this is the whole thing of chochma, to be gili eir, to reveal light. And he brings all the proofs, if you remember, that is gili. Like we see in the nefesh, that chochma's gili is the beginning of the gili of all keches hanefesh. Chochma is the first. Gili is pnimi, and that's chochma. Because tainug on its own is concealed in the nefesh. The difference between tainug and simcha is more revealed, comes from contemplation. Tainug is hidden. And when tainug is revealed, adrabah, it doesn't come into the keches. It causes the keches to siluk, to so-called
ecstasy.
Right, expire or lose themselves in a way. And this is true even a tainug that revives the nefesh, like we spoke about psamim.
Yeah.
Even then, as it revives the nefesh, reviving, let's say, someone that fainted, that type of deep tainug,
Why is it at that level? Does it cause
It's a tainug of Yosha.
Why?
And
Yeah,
definitely the tainug of Cheser. We discussed it then.
yeah. But I didn't understand why the tiny of Yosha, one would say it causes expiration of the chaos.
When it means expiration, it means that it's not, when a person, let's say, is faint and you put some in, like a strong smelling salts, it's not that the tainug is like illuminating the keiches and you now feel that you can go learn Torah and dance and sing and do a lot of things. If the tainug is such a rush that rushes in like that scent that just revives you, it's like in a way it shocks your keiches. It doesn't make them work. It wakes you up. It wakes you up, but it's not the type of like, the difference of silica keiches and no silica keiches. Like when a person says l'chaim, the keiches are not becoming sharper. It may take you to another place, but your keiches of concentration and your regular faculties lose themselves in the high, so to speak.
Right.
So tainug does the same thing. Even the tainug that is reviving somebody. We're not even talking about the internal tainug that you have. So even when it revives, it doesn't revive it by stimulating the keiches to work better. It revives it by shocking you and waking you up. So the keiches are in a state of silica at that moment. Until later, then you begin to start functioning
We
again.
call it tiny.
Well, it calls it tainug hameshiv nefesh. It's a certain type of tainug. It's a deep tainug that revives a person who's, let's say, asleep or faint. So a deep tainug will awaken them. That's what he's speaking about. The best with reich hapsamim is usually when we talk about this tainug of Yosha. Bottom line, it's not gili. And rotzen, will, is merutza. That is a level of gili, but it's not pnimi. Where's the first pnimi? That's gili is chochma. See, he's all going back to saying that chochma on his own is gili, because he's explained the second pirush in the Zohar. In the first pirush, the Zohar chochma is pellets, not gili. So you can't say that. So that part, that first pirush is how chochma is serving tainug, and by concealing. But chochma on its own is all in kol inyonei gili. That's really what he's explaining. So he's explaining it by contrast. So just as it is in the nefesh, the same thing is lamaila. Chochma is the gili. Kiddush chochma nikra eir. He's bringing more proofs. Chochma is called vayhi eir. I'm on top of page Tov Samach Gimel. So chochma, you see from all this that chochma is eir v'gili. Then he brings another bosik. Chochma techaya. Chochma gives life. Chochma will give life, will revive, will regenerate, what's the word? Revitalize. And chayes again is gili dafka. And this is the meaning that the beginning of the Esser Sfira, so Atzilus starts from Chochma because it's the beginning of Gili. Because as we know, the whole point of Atzilus is Gili Ein Sof. Atzilus didn't come to conceal, Atzilus came to reveal Elikus. Like it says in the Zohar, that the emanation of the 10 spheres was begin that you should know him. It's in order to know Hashem. And knowing Hashem is a Gili. The Pardos, he says, Atzilus is Shmei Shel Ein Sof, Meir Al Atzmusei. So therefore, the beginning of Atzilus, it comes to us from Chochma, so that's Gili. Since the whole Mahus of Atzilus, the whole purpose of Atzilus is revelation, so you have to say the first level of that, of Atzilus, which is Chochma, is revelation. You can't call it a level of concealment. He's making the case that Chochma, bottom line on its own, is all revelation. Then he goes further. The same thing you have to say about Chochma stim'aah. Even the concealed Chochma, which is the unconscious Chochma. Since it's Chochma, you have to also say, ultimately, it's Mokar HaGili, the source of Gili. And that's why, in truth, the real beginning of Atzilus is from Chochma stim'aah, like he says in his Ramaz. Then he brings, if you recall, we did the parentheses, which was very interesting because he went all the way into the source itself. That the first root of Chochma is what? Shibidis Asma is how God knows the world. By knowing himself, he knows himself, therefore he knows the world. So he says this too is al kaponim a gili latzmus. It's also a gili. So it's a gili, as is a gili within himself. And that's necessary for us to know him, for there to be knowledge in the world, you have to have that God knows himself. In other words, God manifests in a place of knowing. To use an example, you and I know we exist, right? You sense you're alive. I sense I'm alive. But you don't have to always say it. You don't have to always feel it. So in a sense, God exists. He doesn't have to acknowledge. He doesn't have to say, I know that I exist. I know that I am. But for us to have knowledge in him, God had to, in a way, come down to the level of knowledge altogether. First knowing himself. It's very interesting. So Gili Hayadiyah Latzmuseh, why does God have to know himself? And this explains the question. In the movement, what is Nischadish? What is innovated? What is added by the fact that God knows himself? So even before that, he actually consciously knew himself, so to speak. He also has a knowledge.
Didn't need that to know.
The answer is because before that before Yediyah, the concept of knowing emanated, it was completely concealed. And then there would be no revelation at all. So that's why you have to have the Netzala, you have to have the emanation of chochma. So at least first it's a Gilil Atzmei, to himself. And that allows, there should be a Yediyah by Neshamis and Elamis, that the souls in the world should also understand. Okay, bottom line is chochma, on any level you speak, is fundamentally a level of Gili. And keser is concealment, cheshech. But chochma is eir and Gili. Then he explains that this keser and chochma in that sense is like darkness and light. As we know, cheshech is not just the absence of light, it's also an existence, a creation of its own, and higher than light, like it says, Yetzer eir boira cheshech. Yeshlemer, that in the root, this is keser and chochma, cheshech ve'er chemer b'tzura, form and shape, not form and shape, substance and shape. And also in Aveda, the bittul of keser is a bittul that's higher than tam v'das. The bittul that is beyond and higher than, transcends the intellect, reasons. Rusa de liba, rotzim pashut. Bittul of chochma is a bittul that comes from Yediyah. So he's now also giving an avoidic difference between keser and chochma. Till now it was all haskoladik. So Aveda, it's a difference between bittul hayesh, bittul mitzias. The chochma, even though it's a true bittul, but it's not a bittul. It's a bittul. One second. I'm sorry. Let me correct that. Chochma is a real bittul. It's not just a bittul that comes from hasaga, which is only bittul hayesh. Because the bittul of hasaga is like the bittul of bina. We're not talking about that, which is the avodah of most of the souls in bina, where they understand, and through understanding they go away from their yeshus, from their ego, sense of self. Because without this knowing, without this avodah, they would gravitate toward chumris and yeshus. And through the avodah, there's bittul hayesh. That's the bittul of bina, of hasaga. We're not talking about chochma. So through avodah, they become bittul hayesh because they get closer to alakus, and they want and they desire alakus. Chochma, on the other hand, is riyas hamahus. It sees alakus. So it's real bittul, but it's a bittul that's connected to knowledge, to knowing, to some type of revelation. Well, as keser, the bittul of keser, on the other hand, is complete bittul, because it's l'mayla metam b'das. And to now sum up this whole thing, what's all this coming to say? And therefore, that when you say chochmas pele, it's not chochma tza'atzme. That's how chochma serves its purpose as concealing to keser. So that's still the first Pirush in Zohar. That's not the second Pirush in Zohar. However, he qualifies that even this concealment of chochma pele, as we learned earlier, is not concealment as in concealment in a negative way, that it conceals and diminishes the light. This is an essential concealment. It's the helam ha'atzmi, how something is concealed be'etzem. That keser chochma is on the level of keser mamish. It's helam be'etzem. It's the concealment that says it's so beyond revelation. That's why it's concealed. It's the intimacy, and because it's concealed because of its intensity, not concealed because of its diminishing. On the contrary, it's concealed because the level of etzem is concealed. He's just qualifying because he wants to explain that it's not. We're not talking about the chochma, the pirush, the second pirush in Zohar is gili, and the chochma, the other one is concealment in a negative way. It's concealment as in going higher into the etzem. And generally speaking, that's the level of chochma stim'aah.
So they're both chochma equally, say. If that's a statement, they're both chochma equally.
What?
They're both chochma equally. The helam and the gili, both chochma.
Yeah, but he keeps saying that chochma by itself is really a gili, not a helam. Even that helam. And that too is in the higher level of chochma stim'aah. But the lower level of chochma stim'aah, what we called before chitzedish chochma stim'aah, and definitely chochma gluya, you cannot call the level of peleh. Okay, so what he's saying here is like this: the first pirush of Zohar, is not the real nature of chochma. It's how chochma goes into keser. It's true; it's a very high level, but it's ultimately a concealment in a fundamental way. Whereas that's peleh. So you can't call you can't call the lower level of chochma stim'aah, and definitely not the level of revealed chochma peleh. The kan mefarish. This is the second pirush in Zohar, and now he's explaining the Zohar. The second pirush. The chochma is called peleh mitzad atzmei dafke. What's the kavanah in this? The kavanah dafke b'chinas hagili. Here he explains that, because remember, the pasuk still says asisa peleh. So either way, both pirushim are all explaining the word peleh. But in the first pirush, chochma is peleh because it's assuming the personality of keser, which is helam. In the second, but that's not chochma on its own. Chochma on its own, as we just established at length, is gilu. The second pirush is saying asisa peleh kasisa alef, that the peleh is referring to chochma itself, not as it assumes keser's personality. How does that work? We just said peleh is. So he's saying because it's a different meaning in peleh. Because the b'chinas hagili chochma nikra peleh. And how is that? Then chochma teaches ulfin of a limit. It's aleph. It's in a form of peleh. And here's how the Zohar explains this: the mafarish is alef beis alef bina. So b'chinas hagili chochma shabam yisayid abba lebina. This is how chochma comes into bina, and this comes from the level of peleh. So the chayre in the movement, how does that work?
That means the lowest level of chochma is also peleh.
Right. The gili of chochma, he's going to explain. The chayre in the movement, how does that work? Peleh is higher than gili. If it's peleh, that we just discussed at length. Peleh refers to concealment. So how do we have from this gili, and from this we have a transmission into bina. And this is what he continues. The Zohar continues to explain the shape of aleph. The shape of aleph, the three parts of the aleph, the two yuds and the line that connects them, he's going to explain this. The yud elyon is chochma shebechachma, as it receives from keser. Chochma ma'ayin to motzim. That's the Nikudi law. That's the higher dat of the aleph. So it's how it receives chochma from the ayin of keser. The lower chochma, the lower level of aleph, the lower yud of aleph, is Yesod Abba, that brings down the transmission as mashpia from the Nekuda into Bina. So we have the yud above connects it to the source. The yud below draws it down to Bina. Aleph Bina. And the kav sheba emsa, and the line that connects the two dots in the aleph, is the vav ksov is the Abba. It's the six sides, which is really chesed through. Yeah. And it's like a kav like a thread. Kav, like a line rather. That it looks like a vav. A vav is a transmitter. It's always a transmitter. The yuds refer to connectors. So the yud above is a connector to, like, just a spark. The yud below connects it to bina. The yud above connects it to keser. And the vav draws it down. That's the vav service of.
There's some sort of transformation in chochma.
Okay, one second. So we see from this that the whole shape of the aleph, from beginning to end, is all chochma. Remember, aleph is chochma. And aleph has in it all three things. The only difference is the yud above is the chochma within chochma, the vav is the kav, and the yud below is the yesod within chochma.
And everything, every part.
Just a second. And this is what he says. He's answering the question. The b'chinas hachok Moshe b'chinas aleph, then b'chinas gilidav, and b'chinas peleh. So that's what he's saying. Sisa peleh chochma, even as it is gilui, it's a level of peleh. What does it mean? By inyudin yudua, the chochma b'chinas koyach ma, because chochma is koyach ma, because chochma, even as it's chochma, has in it the spirit of koyach ma, of bittul. Of what? What is this? And ma Hashem havaya b'mila alfin, which we spoke about, the different ways havaya is written out, the yud, hey, vav, hey, the alephs. U'kamayim milagav iu shema. From the inside is the level of shema. This is havaya alfin, the aleph, the chochma, b'chinas ma. B'chinas ma, b'chinas peleh. And b'chinas ma, b'gilei chochma, b'chinas ma, the chochma. And b'chinas ma, b'gilei chochma, b'chinas ma, the chochma.
Explain this.
Okay, the parentheses he says, he's referring not the ma that comes from the higher level of chochma, like he explains in another place. He was talking about the ma in the gili of chochma itself. It's just an additional footnote. Let me say what the bottom line is like this. What he's achieving here, he's making the interface even more intimate, more powerful. Because you see, according to the first pirush of the Zohar, we have an interface. We have keser. But chochma loses its personality, really, in the face of keser. So if you ask the question, you say, well, what about in our gili of chochma, in Atzilus, in the Netzolim, does it really have a connection to keser and to Atzmus Ein Sof? They say, yes, it does, but through losing itself. Because chochma has the ability, because chochma is rooted in Tainuk. Yes, later it will become chochma, the outside of chochma stim'aah, then it will become the chochma gluya. But the first pirush of Zohar is how chochma enters into the realm of keser. The second pirush makes the interface much more powerful, because it's chochma as it's chochma, not as it's in keser, and it still has an element of peleh in it. So I would say something of this nature. If I would give an example, it would be two stages of a student with a teacher. Chochma is the student in the mashal. So there's the first stage where the teacher allows the student to enter into his mind for a while. The student, let's say, is ready. The student has bittul. So he loses himself, and he hears the teacher really, like the teacher let loose. And he enters into the teacher's realm. So he has the connection to it, but it's not the student's mind. What he's doing is he's really hearing the teacher speak and blows him away. But it's not really, can he carry it back to his own level? Can he explain it to others, etc.? So that's how chochma enters into keser. So chochma is there, so there's an interface, because it's better, because in Atzmus Ein Sof Mamash you can't enter. You have no connection. But chochma has that ability, because remember, chochma is really tainuk, it has the ability to enter into tainuk. But it's not chochma on its own. That's the first pirush of the Zohar. That's how the student enters into the teacher's realm. But now the student comes back on his own, he's learning it on his own. Maybe with the teacher, but it's on the student's terms. Now the question is, do you still have peleh? Now you had peleh when you entered the teacher's mind. Of course you had a peleh. Huh? No, but it's a different level of peleh now. Right, that's what I'm saying. Because there the peleh was, you're completely blown away. Like you said, the bittul, complete bittul, l'mayla matan b'das. I don't know, but that's the levels. But the bottom line is, the first chochma, the first level, the student is completely in awe and feels the wonder, the peleh of the teacher's intellect, the keser, so to speak. I'm just using it as a moshel, because obviously it's not mamash, because keser is not intellect. And The second Pirush of Zohar is the student is now on his own terms. But he still feels the sense of wonder and awe in the chochma because it's still rooted in the yud, the higher yud of aleph is still rooted in keser. So he still has that connection to something that's very awesome. He's not in his yesh, he's not a yesh, it's not bina. It's still chochma, and chochma has that element of ma, and the wonder. And this chochma, however, this aleph, this pella is within aleph. The first pella is within keser. This is the pella within aleph. So basically, it's two ways of experiencing the haflah, the wonder, the awe of elokus. One is by entering into keser, but then you're not gili. That's chochma that has no gili. That's the first Pirush in Zohar. The second Pirush in Zohar, chochma is gili, and it's beginning and it's conception. It's conceives of idea, but it's still pella. That's why he gave this whole explanation. He asked the question, what is it pella? Because chochma, even as it is in our own minds, if you really allow it to, if you think about it, chochma, not bina. Bina is full comprehension, so there's more of you there. Chochma on its own, just the conception of idea, has bittul in it. So you still have a sense of ma and pella in it. That's what he's saying.
And even at the lowest level. That's
The
really,
lowest level of chochma.
gosh, it's like, so he's become now a second Matthias, and he hasn't
Well,
lost his
He hasn't lost the keser dimension, correct. So that makes the interface far, far deeper. Because it means it's on our level. Even in Atzilus, even Reishis Sagili, remember the whole thing he said? Even now in Reishis Sagili of Atzilus, not chochma stim'aah. You have an element of that. So therefore, yes, so now you have something that is of elokus in it. In other words, it's something like this. Why is it when we learn something new, and you sense it's coming from another place? You sense it's a truth that's higher than you. You sense even an element of being lifted to a higher place. That is because elokus is entering into the system. The system is sensing something outside of the system. In the first Pirush of Zohar, the system is not in its own domain. It's entered into the higher place. Here, it's now in its own place, and it still senses there's something beyond. So it's essentially in the Gidder of Welt, Chochma allows us to have a little taste of elokus. We're not talking about Kabbalah sale. We're not talking about Bittul Amayla Matam Vadas. In Tam Vadas, no. We're talking about in Chochma. It senses the Ma of Keser.
But still, even though it's in itself, that it's now become something for itself, it still has the bittul of Riyah.
Yeah, but it's not the bittul as it is in Keser itself.
It's still bittul of Riyah, gosh.
But it's not the bittul of Keser itself. It's a lower level.
Sure. But,
this is the two Pirushim. So we have Pella in two different manifestations. The first Pella is on the level of Keser Mamish, and Chochma goes there, like the Zohar says, Kisui Levush for Keser, for Atik. And now we're talking about how even in the Aleph, Kesisa Pella is Kesisa Aleph, that the Aleph of Chochma has that higher Yud. That's the thing. The bottom line is Chochma has that higher Yud.
And it's all the way through.
Keser is not Aleph, remember.
And that's the Velcom Shachar takes that bittul all the way through
to the top Yud.
Yeah, and this is why they call it.
And now begins a whole discussion. What is Kayachma? That's the next page. He says, Mahu. So now becomes a whole discussion on Shema, which is why I thought that here is like, so to speak, ends a certain section, subsection.
This is where it starts talking about the bittul of Chochma.
Bittul of Ma. What is Ma? Bittul.
And
Ma and Ban, basically.
This is Zer and Kodesh, so talking about it. It's interesting. If we go back, like we're planning, we're going to see about half of this reflected in how that the discussion starts out.
Absolutely. So I think we should stop here, maybe. What we should do next is, I would suggest we go back to Perek Kuf Pei Daled.
Nobody says anything about it.
Well, I don't think anyone's going to protest and say they have it all figured out. That's for sure. So the question is really, it's like, this is a famous disagreement in the Gemara. What's greater, Sinai or Iker Harim? Is it Bikiyas, knowing more facts, more information? Sinai, it's more breadth, but not depth. Or Iker Harim, which is going and understanding what you've learned in a deeper way. So we in Shiva used to have two things. You have the Girsa and the Le'iyah. You learn something, the Girsa is just to get a sense of what's going on, the story. The Iyun is you take something, it takes more time. It's really a question of being vertical or horizontal. So we're going now, we want to go, horizontal is like that?
Yeah.
Huh?
Horizontal is this.
Right, horizontal. So this horizontal would be like Sinai, to go more, have more space. Vertical is going deeper in.
Right. There's no Sinai without more depth. So.
Well, you need both. They play off each other. And so I think my preference would definitely be to go back because I have to do it anyway, frankly. Because if I'm going to write anything or try to explain this, you need to really get it more solid. I mean, I have a general sense.
You have 2 weeks to Ayin Beis, so you better hurry. You better hurry.
Why 2 weeks?
Ayin Beis.
Oh, yeah, but Rosh Hashanah, okay, so, it really begins on Shavuot, Ayin Beis. But yeah, it's true. We have to begin action, time for action.
Let's do it.
So that's what I would do, Kuf Pei Daled. The truth is we should go even earlier, but Kuf Pei Daled is at least, I would say from Kuf Pei Daled to here was a certain...
You do Kuf Pei Gimel, it's not a bad, it kind of softens it. Kuf Pei Daled is, that's the first time you bring the concept.
Okay. But good, this is a very important section. This is a very critical way. And be interesting to see how he concludes later with the Shema.
I'll go back as early as you want. You want to start early, you find that.
No. I would go back first to this because this has its own self-contained element to it. Once you get this, you can go back even earlier. I would do that, and also we'll see how this evolves now when the summer is over. See how everybody else is where they're at. This is good stuff. It's very, very. It's tying together. I get that. That's a good piece.
How can it so important?
I have looked it up already in Eitz Chaim. And this is a lot of this is straight from the Zohar, from Bir Ezer, from the Tzemach Tzedek. He has this whole piece, the two Perushim Zohar, the alef-peleh. So I was learning it. I want it to be an interesting comparative study. It's almost entirely word for word from there. But what the Rebbe Rashab does is ties it all together. Obviously, we said Kuf Pei Daled Reish Chof Ches. That's 184 to 228. Okay, so I'm gonna stop the record.